with the session where Najib has asked that everybody open to page 10 to 11 because he doesn't have the transparency. And
I forgot.
No, we have rules on this conversation, there's no transparency.
well, we probably could have connected to the web and linked to the website, but that's all right. We can. All right. Well, I'd like to welcome you all to the afternoon session. And today I will be co-facilitating with Najib Kiles, the conference organizer. And what we're going to be talking about is the sort of role of research and consulting. And maybe to get started, I can just ask everyone, how many of you or universities would sort of actively encourage their faculty to do outside consulting?
That's a good question.
Oh, not too much.
Yeah,
We bring money no matter which way.
yeah, so I hadn't really expected to see a lot of hands, and apparently I did not. So what we're saying is that how many of your universities allow outside consulting? Outside, consulting with,
Depends what you're doing.
It depends on the...
Yeah, this is why I'm doing like that.
Okay, so basically, what we're seeing here is that nobody's university encourages outside consulting. A few of them allow it, but do not appear to be that enthusiastic about it. So I think the central question of this particular session needs to be, is that a good thing, or should we maybe be rethinking our attitudes? Why don't I start by opening it up by asking Najib, and you're limited to 15 minutes.
15 or 50?
Well, it's your conference, and I'm going to start trying to stop you at 15.
No, but you have the chair here.
Yeah, well, actually, you're the co-chair. But I want to why don't you talk a little bit about what you were thinking of in terms of this?
Maybe with an anecdote I can go through that quickly. Consulting in our university, I saw that in our university, and then after that I saw it in all the Latin American universities. And then to my surprise, I started getting information that the same thing is happening in the United States. And 1 month ago in Miami, I met with some guy from Venezuela that is in Spain now, and he's telling me that he met with many people in many universities in Europe, and they have the same kind of situation. So I thought that it was my country, because it was developing countries, but it seems to be everywhere. Okay, that's the information I have. I cannot prove that. Okay, it's just the information I have. So in my university, most people, all scientists, are allergic to the word consulting. Allergic. Really allergic. And they make you feel bad because if you are a consultant, no matter if you are a good or bad consultant, it's a consultant. Okay? So being a consultant is even, you go down in the perception of your quality. So, I'm not exaggerating. I wish Andres Tremante were here because he would confirm what I'm saying. One time I told one of the scientists, because most people that were against that were fact scientists, physicists, chemists, mathematicians, etc. So, hey, I know you lab. I've been in your lab and you made great things in your lab. And I've been in your lab also, and you made a great thing with your lab. Could you tell me where is my lab? said, do you have lab? Yes, I have lab. Can you tell me where is my lab? Because I am information system development professor. Can you tell me where is my lab? I am not software tester that can have, some kind of lab, okay? No one knew where my lab was. My lab was the industry. If any information system that I'm a directive for undergraduate student or graduate student or as consultant for the university or whatever, it doesn't need any reviewer to publish a paper, but you need a system being used. So it's harder than to publish a paper, to have a system that is being used by its user and they're happy with it. That's the best test, better than any paper produced by Einstein. So, since then, the world was, if I don't have this lab in the industry, if I am not consultant, I am a pirate as academic. We say pirate for the people who would not know what they are doing. Okay, because all what I can do is to repeat the books. So I need my lab to give something different than the books. And my lab is the industry. And to get industry, you have to be a consultant. I have to consult, and being consulted is, to consult is two ways, highway. You consult and you are consulted. You cannot provide any consult if you don't consult. So it's completely reciprocal with one another. So through the consulting process, you start building a system. In our case, an information system. In other cases, information, let's say other engineering, you need to do similar things because you have users, you have clients, you have people paying you, you have meta users, you have super users. So you need to be consulting with all of them, different things with different levels, and all that, in order to provide them with their requirements. So our opinion was at the time, if you are not doing just science, you need to be a consultant in order to be doing research. Because if you're not a consultant, you cannot do research. How you're gonna do it? How you're gonna do it? Because your lab is the industry. And then after that, some scientists started, gaining the idea because consultants were having more money. So they wanted to be consultants. So they started saying, hey, we also do, RM consulting way, in an implicit way. Because all what we are doing, someone is taking that and transforming that in application in science or in engineering, whatever. So they are doing after us the consulting process. So we are providing the input to the consulting process that other people are doing. So we are meta consultants. That's what it is. Because the consultants are consulting with us, which is right. Because I make consulting with them. When I was asked, by our client something that I have no, I would go to the computer scientist and would ask him. So I'm making consulting. Oh no. So he noticed that I am making consulting with him and he wanted a piece of the money I'm earning. I said, you're right. Next time, you will be the computer scientist expert in the project. in the next project. So it started working. You see, more people noticed that, and more people wanted to do the same thing. And then he told me that right at the beginning he felt that it was monetarily unfair. But after doing what he was doing, he felt intellectually happy, not just monetarily happy. And that was the reason why we created the foundation of the university that is linking the professors in the university with the industry. But our difference with the European, as I was told 1 month ago, and with the American universities, is that the way we created that thing, which is an innovation, it has been for 27 years working, is the largest revenue that the university is getting is still from that foundation. The best thing what we got there is the thing that was most difficult to us, is to create a foundation but managed not by professors, not by the dean. I was the dean, I didn't want that. Okay? Not by the president of the university. President of the university is one voice in the consulting board, consulting, not executive. The real board were people, managers, and were people from industry. That was the real board. And the managers are people from outside of the university, or if professors, they have to have proved their managerial skills. Because managerial skills, as all of you know, are completely different than academic skills. Because you can be an Einstein, but Einstein would have been a bad manager. So something is to be a manager, a CEO, and something different could be, to be an academic publishing 100 research papers a year. That doesn't mean that could not be integrated in the same person or in the same group. And this is what we proposed, and it worked, and it's still working. But the guy from Europe told me that his experience informed him not to mention Venezuela, because I mentioned that this is an example of what we did in Venezuela. No one will listen to me because of the perception of what Venezuela is. And I agree with him. But it's working. And the best proof that it was something good, innovation, that is working, is that survived Chavez. 27 years old, and survived the destruction that we're having in Venezuela in the last 17 years. Survived. And still, the largest revenue the university is getting after the public money. So it's working. So what's wrong with being consultant? How you can make research without making consulting, at least in an implicit way? So this is...
Well, why don't we ask that question to people, because we clearly see that nobody's university is enthusiastic about consulting. Some allow it. Why do you suppose universities are uncomfortable with consulting? Anyone have any?
It might dilute their primary duties as instructors or deans or whatever they're doing.
So maybe people consider it a distraction. Now, mind you, realistically, when you're talking about tenured professors, you're talking about a job that probably could be done in 15 hours a week. Realistically, once you're tenured, it's a lot harder getting there. But once you're tenured, so we're really worried about the time. But and yes, that's a common reason. I'm just trying to suggest that not all of these reasons necessarily will hold water. And I want to talk about this more. I heard that. I saw a hand here.
I was going to say you could take them away from like their scholarly research and put them on more, like business side of doing pays for consulting.
Yep. Yeah, and you know, let's think about scholarly research. Is scholarly research, you know, the same as sort of, say, you know, stamping out shoes on an assembly line? The more time you spend on it, the more good ideas you come up with?
No, I hope not.
Yeah, that's but yet, in a certain sense, our attitude is managing it that way. So that's one thing. Any other?
I can't imagine consultancy and research. Consultancy should be an instrument to research. Because research is multi-purpose, it's multidisciplinary. So you cannot conduct empirical research without consulting. So I think this consultancy, we should also look at it as an instrument. Then there, right, I want to raise a question.
Yep.
Food for thought. The university consulting those on the field, or those field consulting. Now, who owns the intellectualism?
The intellectual property. That's another very common objection, for fear that the university might actually lose some important piece of intellectual property for that they're paying as a result of their professors' salaries. I have an amusing example of this, and later on I'll talk about the solution that we resolved for this. But this happened at my university, and this just shows you how bizarre university thinking is. We developed this really innovative process called practice centers, whereby a company would pay the university $15,000, and then what we would do is for a whole semester we would have 2 or 3 students working a total of 40 hours a week on a particular project that was, you know, arranged for by the practice center under the supervision of a faculty member. And the idea, great experience for the students, and it gave the company the opportunity to have students working on a project. It would be very valuable for the company. So we had this one practice center, and what they wanted the students to do was work on the company's internal website, just basically trying to improve their communications with SharePoint. Our sponsored research got a wind of this, and they demanded the company sign an agreement giving the university the intellectual property rights to the company's internal website. Now, not only did that contract fall through, but that...
You see, but this is another reason. This is another reason why a foundation like this one should not be directed by professor or by the authority of the university. Thanks to what we did, that is an external manager, an external CEO. What we achieved there is the rule of no rule, which means each project would be negotiated with the client. Let me give you an example. Information system, software-based information system development. There is 3 ways of making, you know, a business. Okay? 1, you keep all the property, the client, not the university. You keep the property and the copyright of the software. I can do nothing with it. This is the price. If you want 20 or 30% of discount, you can have the software and you can do with it whatever you want to do with it. But you allow me also to use it in other projects. You decide as client if you give me the 30% of discount or not. And then 40% of discount and sometimes 50% of discount we gave to the client who would use the software, and we make a technological transfer to him or to her in order to use the software, but he cannot sell it. The only people who can sell it to other clients are us, which is an investment. So you got these 3 kinds of people. You can have 5, 6, 7 rules, but if you are under the umbrella of the president of the university, you cannot do it.
Yes.
That's the problem. So this is why it should be a foundation working with the professor of the university, but not managed by the university.
Well, and I think one of the most important things that you mentioned here is the fact that what tends to derail this type of arrangement is the exception. For example, in the situation that I described, I do not believe that our university is run by complete idiots, even though we looked like complete idiots when we wanted to lay claim to this company's internal website. But the point is, this was an exception. This was something they hadn't seen before in the types of grants that they were used to administering, so they tried to apply their existing rules. And the problem is the academics have a lot of existing rules. There are a couple of other things that I think might be obstacles, and I'm just curious if anyone has thought of them. Jeremy, go ahead.
There is this, again, it's more general, and I think it comes from an ideal of what education is. That you don't want to sully education with economics. It's kind of like a Victorian thing. Now, I'll say this, however, I think, and you're going to disagree violently with this. I think there are certain foundations of this particular system that do lend themselves to unethical practices. When I talk about ethics, I'm going back to the Greek sense of ethics. And if one doesn't think so, all they need to do is just open up the newspaper every day and find out what companies have been trying to do what it does in an unethical fashion. It's not simply, we have this idealistic notion, and this is where I'm talking as an academician, that basically when you talk about a system like this, you're talking about an equal exchange, that there is a fair trade, that there are certain assumptions that we'd like to see happen. It's kind of like the idealization of Adam Smith, this kind of stuff. The reality is, again, the daily headlines, or Wall Street and all the others, I think are more typical of what this does. This type of a system, in many ways, encourages that type of behavior just by the very assumptions on which it rests.
The phrase most repeated in academy, in my experience,
Yeah, it is. And it was, yeah.
but he's making money. Well, so he got to leave.
But you know what?
As is he's making money as something bad.
Well, but it's not noble. The pursuit of someone who's a professor should be just that. Academe that we're studying and we're getting better and we're working with our students, and it's like the old school marm. It doesn't include in the model that you can be both things, that you can be that professor and you can also be a successful consultant, having a little something on the side here where you're making double the income you are.
And, I think that one other thing that, and I think we're almost alluding to it here a little bit, is that very often the most aggressive and eloquent attacks on consulting come from departments such as philosophy, who are very good at launching eloquent attacks, but don't actually have a lot of consulting opportunities. And I would also say, if you look at the power structure of a typical university, if you look at the very senior professoriate, if they have gotten to where they're going without ever having done consulting, if consulting starts to achieve higher status within the institution, what happens to their relative status? If all of a sudden we start congratulating people for going out and doing consulting contracts, then the status of the professors who reach their high pinnacle without consulting, well, of course, there's only so much status to go around. And I mean, I have noticed this a little bit in my university, and it's sort of strange. In my university, if you take a look at status, on the university as a whole, the thing that probably gives the highest status is acquiring grants, because that's something that is measured across all the different top American research universities, and so forth. the total dollar value of grants. Now, in the College of Business, we're not very good at getting grants. We've managed to succeed in a system where we don't have to get grants like they do in engineering or medicine. Our salaries, more or less paid by the fact that we've got students. So basically, all of our prestige accrues from publishing in the premier journals. I mean, literally, that is, if you look at the salary levels, there's a direct correlation between the number of top-tier publications and what people are making in different areas. Now, what happens when people start going out and getting grants? And that's something that I have done a number of times over the past year, federal grants in mainly in case writing, which happens to be my passion. Well, basically, for them to acknowledge case writing is something that can lead to prestige in the university, would basically represent a decline in prestige for the top tier publications. And so, as a consequence, we're in this peculiar situation where we've gotten over $500,000 of grants in the last 3 years related to case writing, and yet putting cases on your resume is about the same as a typo. It's not going to completely destroy your resume. It's kind of like the misspelling of principal versus principal. So, and of course, I've got 50 of those misspellings on my resume. The point is, it is a philosophical type of thing, and we have to realize that when we start allowing enthusiastic support for new things, people who have achieved great accomplishment and status by not doing those new things are not necessarily going to be that enthusiastic about it.
But is it viewed as a slippery slope?
Well, I'm sure it's viewed as a slippery slope, but I'll tell you, virtually anything we do in academia is a slippery slope if you look at it. If you're getting paid to teach 15 students, per class in a discipline that is not going to get them a job, or is going to make it much harder to get them a job, and does not produce any resources, then are you behaving ethically? We've got huge departments that are doing precisely that.
Yeah, like what about a philosophy major, getting a bachelor's in philosophy? What is that student going to do in today's job market when they graduate?
And as long as they understand going into it that it's not going to get them a job, philosophy, political science, there's a whole bunch of fields like that, then I guess it's okay. But when we actually sell them the university degree on getting a job, which is basically what most of our students are sold on, and then encourage them to go into these majors. And I don't, once again, I believe in letting the individual make these decisions, but majors where the cost of educating the students is much higher than the actual revenue you're getting in, then all of a sudden, basically somebody is paying for that, and this is university faculty members, and this is true even in business schools, do not believe in the laws of physics, which suggest that, the stuff going in has to roughly balance the stuff going out, or weird things happen in the long
But
run.
how can you weigh somebody who's really fabulous in philosophy, getting a philosophy degree, against somebody who's mediocre, getting a business management degree, but that kid gets the job, and that philosophy major has to go on and get a PhD to be able to do something with his or her life?
Well, but you see, if that philosophy major gets a PhD in philosophy or in English, that philosophy major is unemployable. Right now, in those disciplines, only 5% of the PhDs can actually get academic jobs. And I mean,
No.
Isn't
Let me tell you something.
What?
If you get a bachelor or a PhD or whatever in philosophy, anything you're gonna do in your life, you're gonna do it better.
Yes.
Of course.
Even
of course,
electrical
people-
engineering,
But I'm playing
you're
the
gonna do it
devil's-
better.
I'm playing the devil's advocate.
If you get a bachelor or a PhD or whatever in philosophy, anything you're gonna do in your life, you're gonna do it better.
Yes.
Of course.
Even
of course,
electrical
people-
engineering,
But I'm playing
you're
the
gonna do it
devil's-
better.
I'm playing the devil's advocate. These are absolutely the critical thinking kinds of skills that we so need in our society, but are not valued.
But then you have to not, it's
Yeah,
not,
going
it's
to
not
the
the
next
ideal.
section.
It's not the ideal. I'm not talking about the ideal. I'm talking about the way philosophy is actually taught in universities. as opposed to the ideal. And I don't want to pick on philosophy in particular. Or any
Go ahead, it's fine. I'm here, I can defend myself.
You cannot confuse
Go for it.
You cannot confuse philosophy with philosophers.
But, please go ahead.
I think the basic reason for learning various courses is for the purpose of collaborative work. So if we bring philosophy but philosophy may not dwell in its own at the end of the day. A philosopher may be needed in engineering. He may be needed in medicine. And then when there's some form of collaboration, then we can be talking about having a result. That's why I'm glad.
Well, and you see, I
Can
agree
you
with you.
please, I tell you that in my personal experience, the 5 years of philosophy I got after the PhD, full time, I swear to God, that made me a lot better consultant in information system development than I would have been without them. And this kind of thing, there was no day that I made a consulting, job without noticing that I am applying something of the philosophy, a course of philosophy that I got.
And you see, now we come to the thing that I think is rather interesting about this. If this is true, and we've gotten a little bit off tangent, but I think there seems to be some interest, so we'll continue it for just a few minutes more. But if philosophy really is that valuable, then philosophy needs to do a hell of a lot better job marketing itself. And now we're back on that slippery slope, because now they're going to start marketing themselves. And by the way, if you took philosophy at our university,
In my opinion, philosophy should be marketed for the people who already finished their studies, master or PhD or whatever. It do better, more good than teaching that in undergraduate.
All right, let's go back a little bit of history here. I think.
okay, but not to the Greeks. I'll go back a little way, but not to the ancient Greeks.
I want to take a look at a period that went from the rationalist period. They talk about the latter 1700s until, as I said, to the latter 1800s. Something happened, the compartmentalization and so forth. We've gotten to this whole idea, and I call it the monetization of schooling. And what's happened is that now that everything is monetized, marketed, and on and on and on. But I want to introduce another element here, because I think we've really lost
I just want to stop you for a second. So the monetizing of schooling, so what you're saying is it was better in that period where 1% of the population got educated as opposed to...
Let's look at some realities here. And I deal with these realities every day, you do as well. We go out and we find that the individual, first of all, you look at the school system, which is a bloody wreck. It's not an educational system, it's a very badly run school system. We don't really produce thinkers. We're going to have that little discussion in a day or two or three on the techne and the episteme stuff again. We're going to bring that up again, because that's integral with this whole discussion. And
That's
so
great.
it's a way we raise the kids and everything else, and what we teach them to do. But I'm going to raise that other issue we're going to talk about again tomorrow. We're going to get that ad in there and talk about marketing and idea. I'm going to market the idea of survivability. And I think what we've done is, I think we've stepped on our own toes. Because we are so caught up in this type of, the monetization, the system, and all this other stuff. We've lost it. We don't see the forest because of the trees, in the trivial expression. It's all about survivability. And what we're doing, I think, and what we're talking this way in many ways, it's really questioning whether or not we're even going to survive as a species. I think it's that dramatic. If you do not have the critical thinking, you don't have a philosophy, all that stuff integrated, not simply as a subject, but we don't integrate that as a way of being. We do not internalize that. I don't think we're going to survive as a species.
So what you're saying then is that cockroaches have a philosophy because they've survived
No, you're missing, I think you're
billions of
missing the point.
years?
You're missing the point. But there are,
Intentionally.
but we're talking about basically some really ugly realities in terms of complexity, of the ability to process ideas and stuff like that. And it's very controversial. I will raise it.
But Jeremy, the problem is that those kinds of things right now I don't think are valued. And
And the reason why they're not valued, and the reason why we're not gonna survive as a species. We don't value it, it gets into a little bit of Freud here, and it gets into that death wish.
You don't need,
I don't think we're gonna survive as a species with that, this attitude.
Time out, the team is
We're gonna
speaking,
survive.
he's the organizer.
in my opinion, you don't need to read any philosopher in order to be a philosopher.
Okay,
You can be a philosopher as long as you can make a good, adequate reflection what you are doing each day.
okay.
So you can be a philosopher without having read any philosopher.
Okay, I've got a suggestion. I curse myself for having mentioned philosophy.
You have to,
See,
what she says.
Do
You
I
have,
get
to,
you? What-
you have to have critical thinking with regard to what you are doing.
But what I'm going to suggest is that we leave the philosophy versus other stuff to a discussion in our next conference, because that's.
Well, I was just gonna kind of see if we can pull back to the consulting
Oh,
research.
right.
I think I gotta segue back in. So, taking a look at the millennials, which are the people, our students now that are learning, and they want to know the theories, they want to know the things you're teaching. We teach business of healthcare to our master's students. But the reality is, when they raise their hand to ask a question, they want the professor or whoever's teaching the class, you know, you can share a couple stories about what you did before when you consult or whatever. They want to know what you're doing now.
Yes,
Now.
yes, yes.
And if you're not doing anything now, your credibility goes.
Yes.
Because they're people that want to see. So the idea, it's almost implied that if we're going to be on the cutting edge of research, we have to be consulting as educators.
If not, all what you can do is to repeat a book.
Yeah, and they don't believe you. The
So
thing
you
is
are,
that,
you are providing instruction, not education.
and if it's done in a pure academic setting, you know, the pure academic setting is not viewed as much as if you're doing your research at IBM or with Pfizer or whatever else you've got, because those are considered tangible and real. The other one is an esoteric exercise, you know, so.
Which time would you make us the favor to provide all the attendees of the conference with the plenary talk? To tell the people what you are saying.
He just wants you to send him an email with all the thoughts that you're saying.
Yeah.
He'd be
Okay,
really
well,
excited
I have it
about
written
that.
down.
Okay.
No, just I was thinking exactly this minute that Brandon, you said that you found ground, but nobody never. Maybe I sound completely crazy. Let's say this way, but research and consulting. A lot of tenured professors really have very straight track. Bachelor degree, master degree, PhD, became professor and never was in real world. Maybe we have to turn upside down and maybe we have to hire professor or to be professor only after a certain period of doing consulting, real practitioner.
Oh, yeah.
And not exactly grant, but maybe like really, you 3 years in academia, get out back to field. Maybe then it would be beneficiary for our students, and maybe we will consult them in their major interest, philosophy or English, and then I see them in a messy, small cashier who serve me like customer service representative. So maybe it will turn table and the idea of higher education and consulting without any grant. Especially in new business management, we have plenty of now headache with healthcare business and insurance and
Are you suggesting that we should design a program where we maybe require 12 years of business experience
Yes,
before they
yes.
maybe 5 years of senior
I will-
management experience?
yes, I will give you an example. When I graduated,
I'll give you an example. That's all those guys up there.
Yeah.
That's my program.
Brenda, when I graduated with master's degree and I got, because in Soviet Union, bachelor and master degree, we all remember, was 5 years combined in 6 days a week, without internet or computer. So when I came to work like naive, romantic, enthusiastic, whatever, motivated and ready, what that academic dean of my special institute, it was experimental, and it even didn't have name, if you anybody familiar what it means in Soviet Union, post office box. 112. What is the name of secret institute? So what he did, he sent us on polygon for 2 months. What stop to keep crazy ideas which you came from university? You want to go to the Mars? No, stop it. Let's go to our polygon and substitute every single worker at this line and find mistakes. Why they screw up our experiments? Why they don't make the elements like we wanted? Let's do, and then come with your proposal what you're supposed to do. And we were doing 3 months shift from 3 p.m. to 11 p.m. regular shift like workers. On this is manufacturing, like doing all this production of all elements and mixes. Trust me, we are different. Group of us, what this is was like they put us into water. That's why maybe what this is even in American higher education, maybe in the world of higher education, we need to come in opposite direction. The tenured professors knew what they're talking about, what they're teaching about, that they had their hands dirty in this way, you know.
Oh my God, I love to hear that. I like
We're missing out something.
Yep.
Every economy has manpower plan and the issue of labor market. When you're talking about this issue you have just raised, don't you think there will be a conflict between the manpower planning of an economy and the labor market and the courses we have in the university? How do we resolve this issue?
Are you sure that it's a conflict or it's a polar opposition?
Well, I don't know if it could be every economy has manpower plan.
Yes.
That is for this discipline, this is what we have, this is what your university should turn out, this is what polytechnic should turn out, this is what every economy, even US, has manpower
Even
plan
in US,
for human
you're right.
resources. Then, every nation, both developing and developed nation. Then we have the labor markets here.
Yes.
It is the labor market now that will discriminate. And the manpower planning, we have to form an agreement, okay, between the labor market
Yes.
and
yes.
then how will the
But to do
university
that,
now come
the first step, in my opinion, to do that is not to take the opposite always as contradictory, because many times the opposite are polar and are complementary. So what you are saying, that these opposites are not contradictory as some or many academicians would say. They are not contradictory, they complement each other because they are polar opposite. So what I think what we should do, if we can, is to show people that these two things are not necessarily in conflict, but they can get in a cybernetic relation, and we can get a positive feedback from which we can get synergies. So instead of conflict between contradiction or contradictory opposite, we can have synergy between polar opposite that don't exclude each other but require each other. So the material world, the industry require academy, but academy require industry. They cannot get divorced as we are doing.
But Najib, here's the flaw. The fatal flaw is a tenured professor, seasoned, tenured, respected professor, working at XYZ University, 5, 6, 8 years, whatever. How motivated is that professor going to be to step out of his or her comfort zone and go do consulting at XYZ business?
Well, you have an example here.
Yeah, but okay,
But it's unique personalities,
but it's very unique. I think that sometimes tenured professors work so hard, they get so tired, so worn out in the teaching and the publishing and all their obligations, they have to step out and do above and beyond to go do consulting. It may be over the top.
Well, if I can just, interject here a little bit. I mean, it's true at a lot of places, however, it is not true at the absolute top universities. If you go to the websites of faculty members at Harvard Business School and Stanford and Wharton, what you're gonna see on the faculty website, first thing is their major and consulting agreements and their board positions. Because they operate at the very high levels, and that's part of the status. And this is not just true at the business school, you'll also see it in arts and sciences when the opportunities are there. The problem is that for most of us at the rest of these universities, it's not necessarily the highest levels that are going to appear to do the consulting. The other thing is that a lot of the faculty at a business school such as ours do some consulting, but they keep it hidden because they don't want to find people objecting to what they're doing, so they simply don't talk about it. You fill out a form each year saying you're going to do some consulting, you send it in, those forms go into the form with 1 billion other pieces of data, so it's probably the best place in the world to hide it, and then you basically do it. Now, one of the things that our university did, and this is sort of the second part of the story, that about that practice center where I told you where we ran into the sponsored research. This was so ridiculous that it managed to get our department chair, dean, even the provost involved. And basically what we did is, well, you've got all these practice centers. Instead of calling it consulting, let's call it a grant and give the university a little bit of overhead on it. Not very much, like $1,000 or $2,000 for each of these grants. Now, all of a sudden, this is aligned with the university's goal of getting more grants, and it also means that the College of Business is now producing grants for the first time, because we're doing 5 of these a semester. And because it was grants, we were used to, in grants, having different intellectual property agreements, my argument is, if you work in a normal consulting firm, and I did for 5 years before I went into my doctorate. I did 5 years in the Navy, then my MBA, then 5 years as an entrepreneur, and then a consultant. And in a normal consulting firm, you're lucky if you get 1/3 of what you're billed for, because they have to cover overhead and research and stuff like that. Well, universities operate the same way from an economic standpoint.
Let me give you an anecdote that complements what you are saying. When we tried to do that in Venezuela, the people that were against it as enemies were people from physics, chemistry, mathematician, etc., you see? So they would not accept, because they said that that's corruption.
Yeah. Well,
That
because they already have grants.
To take, for example, a chemical engineer, and he finds a project in electrical engineering, but he cannot work on it because he's a chemical engineer. So to provide him with an incentive, we thought on providing a percentage, 10% of any project that the person can find that he cannot or she cannot work on the project because it's from other city. So all hell broke loose because the dean of the university is corrupting the university. It was a huge problem. Then after 5-6 months of having discussions, the Lord illuminated me. And I told one of the physicists, the most respected one, I told him, when you make a book, the people pay you for the copyright, a percentage of the book. He said, Professor Krauss, this is different. We're not talking about the commission here of 10%. We are talking about the copyrights of the book. I said, well, if we can talk about the copyright of the book, we can talk about the copyright of the project. He said, well, in that sense, there's no problem. Everyone accepted that. So we have a 10% of the copyright of the project instead of the word of commission.
Yeah. And that a lot of how you frame things is very important. I would just I would just perhaps conclude this session by commenting that this has a lot of overlap with the original session, because the one real problem associated with consulting projects in academia is consulting projects you typically only get paid for when you're trying to solve a real world problem, because people don't want to pay you to consult on things that aren't real world problems. The thing about real world problems is, do they ever confine themselves to a single discipline? Have you ever seen a real world problem that confines itself to a single academic discipline? Because I certainly haven't. And what that means is that it not only are you out there taking money for your services horror, but you're also operating as an interdisciplinary researcher horror. It's the double trouble. And until we address the attitudes, and sometimes it can be as simple as simply reframing the question. Those people who are familiar with psychology will know that how you frame a choice has a huge impact on how people express their preferences. So ultimately, part of the solution may be trying to frame consulting differently. Part of it may be pointing out that consulting is truly the way you can get practice at interdisciplinary research. And part of it is just satisfying the job market, because the people who are asking you for consulting are often the same people who employ your students. If you can get them arguing to the university that it's really important to have the faculty consulting, then all of a sudden that changes the equation, because the university understands that if its students are not employed, they'll go down in the rankings. And of course, that's for every university. That's going to drive them. Oh, we don't want ours to go down in the rankings, because then we'll lose prestige. And so these are some of the things that we may need to think about.
Taking the risk of boring you, please remember that the conversational session has no paper as input. What might have is paper as output. So please, what you got in your biological memory, try to write whatever you can write, in order to share it with other people. Because the conversational session, the output is what is in your biological memory. But if we don't do anything with this memory, it cannot be transferred, to the next conference or to other people, or you see what I mean. And the important thing is that each one of us here is interpreting in different way what we're talking, and with different emphasis depending on his life and his interest in life or interest in research. So I never saw an output of an invited session talking about the same thing. Sometimes you say, hey, these people attended the same session? Because all of us have different lives and different interests and different interpretations. Right? And this is the richness of the conversational session, to leave something that could be transformed in something written, let's not call it paper, that could be shared with others. So the input is not paper, the output is the paper. Please remember that.
Okay. So why don't we take about a 5-minute break before the next session? I want to take any more of that session's time, and then we'll move on.